Hey everybody, it's Pastor Jeff, and Brother Adam's going to be helping me navigate this class tonight. But I hated to be out and not join you via video. So, plus people are wanting this stuff online, so that people who can't be there in class can still participate. So we're going to run through this class 3 together. You're going to have some times we're going to pause the video and discuss. But let's just get started with a word of prayer. And so if y'all pause the video and call on someone to pray there, that would be great. All right. So last week we started looking at the way money moves into and out of our households. And in financial terms, that's your cash flow. And I gave you a cash flow sheet last week. It was provided by Thrivent Financial. There is a budget sheet that you should have that we're going to start working on this week. And you need 3 copies of that. I'll explain more in the video about why you need 3 copies of that. It's provided by Wells Fargo. I think I might have taken that logo off on your sheet that you have, but it'll be on the link on YouTube. So folks who are grabbing it on YouTube will have a link directly to that sheet. But one of the things I want you to do tonight to get started is you had your cash flow sheet this week. You filled it out. You've had time to kind of reflect on it. I hope have it with you tonight. But let's go around and discuss one thing you learned from your cash flow sheet. So from your cash flow sheet, one thing you learned. Pause the video and we'll get back to it. So we all probably realized after working on our cash flow sheets that we still have work to do. Finances is one thing that for certain requires continual effort. We can achieve freedom. It is possible to achieve freedom, but we also don't ever want to get in a situation where our finances are managing themselves. And so as I kind of thought about that, about finances managing themselves, I want you to think about how we're talking about stewardship and all these things, even the money life indicator that you took that first week. We're talking about stewardship. Finances is one area that flows into other areas of our stewardship, but it's one area of stewardship that God has entrusted us with. So he gives us these resources, our jobs, the income that comes from those jobs, and then what do we do with the money that has been put into our hands? And so in 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 2, God's word challenges us as moreover, it's required in stewards that a man be found faithful. Some translations simply translate this as trustworthy, but I think we got to consider the word faithful like it is there in the King James, because faithfulness, we want to have fidelity in our finances. So whatever we're doing, we want to do it well. We want to create the plan and stick to the plan. So let's pause the video for a second and you all talk about what it means to you to be faithful. So give each other a description of what you would say it means to be faithful. Okay. And so we'll pause the video and come back to this. All right. So to be faithful requires commitment. It means that you're actively involved in something. One of the things that was pointed out last week is that some disagreements as it relates to finances are because one party is failing to adhere to the budget. And so let's just call it what it is, but that exhibits a lack of faithfulness, right? And is certainly a source of many conflicts in relationships. And so for a budget to work, everyone involved needs to make a commitment to be faithful to the budget. We need to understand who we're making our commitment to. Now, it'd be very easy for us to say that if we're married, well, I'm making a commitment to my spouse to adhere to this budget. And that's true. But it's also true that you are in a class trying to learn to manage finances God's way. And so if we're going to manage finances God's way, then we have to be thinking about the fact that our commitment is to God as well. And we're committing to be Christ honoring with our finances. So Ecclesiastes 5:5 reminds us that it is better that we should not vow than that we should vow and not pay. So it's better to never offer the commitment than to commit and not follow through. It's kind of like the story in the Bible where the man had two sons and he told him to go work in his vineyard. And the one son said, I go, but he didn't. And the other son said, I'm not going, but he afterward repented and did. And he said, who did the will of the Father? The one who repented and went and did what he was supposed to do. So you can see what I'm saying. It's better to, not vow than to vow and not pay. So the question though is how do we deal with the issue of someone breaking the budget without causing conflict? And so I'm going to put this back to y'all for a discussion for a few moments. And I want you to talk about how you think an exception to the budget, how it should be handled. After y'all discuss it, I'm going to give you my 2 cents on the matter, okay? So pause the video and discuss how to handle an exception to the budget in your home. If you're single presently, you may not always be single, so how would you want to approach an exception if you're having to deal with someone else in your home? So exceptions are something that I want to do that is outside the plan, whether that's eating a nicer meal this week, so I need an allotment for food that I don't normally have, or I've had had something that I've had my eye on the Amazon app, and I want to take advantage of that and purchase that, and so I need some more personal expense money. These are things that can be talked about in advance of the exception, so there's no need for there to be a conflict. Let's talk about why I want to spend this money. Let's talk about if we can make that work within the realm of our budget, or if that's something that needs to still wait to a better day and time. So we handle it ahead of time. But the question I feel like that was asked of me was more if someone's consistently violating a category. The first way to approach that, I'm going to say, is this. Budgets are not law, although they can feel that way. And so we want to be very careful about being legalist when it comes to a budget, but we also can't be so gracious that we can do whatever we want to. So in extending grace to someone when they're violating the budget, the question is, are they aware that they are violating the budget? You say, well, how in the world, Brother Jeff, could they be unaware that they're violating the budget? Well, maybe they're swiping their card and they're not accounting for the money. In that case, you should consider going to a cash-only system in that category for a time. You say, oh my goodness, here comes the Dave Ramsey in him again. I mean, let's just be honest. It works to have to spend that money, and we've talked about that already in this class. So restore accountability. If they don't want to do the cash system, ask them to be willing for a little while to keep receipts and to go over those, at least every few days to see how the spending's going in that category. If you're still unable to resolve the conflict and adhere to the budget, then you need to sit down with someone that you both trust to discuss the issue and have a third party help you navigate the issue at hand. It's a good thing to have help, and I think we have highlighted this verse already, but Proverbs 15:22 in the NIV says, plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors they succeed. So just remember that you don't need to have your best friend Susie or your best friend Johnny talk to you alone about your particular situation necessarily, because you could be gossiping about your spouse and their money habits. You really need to have an independent, impartial third party that you both trust discuss the issue with you and provide wise counsel as it relates to your finances. So what we want to do is we want to start working on a budget this week. And as we start working on a budget, especially in homes where there are spouses involved, we want to have this be a point of discussion. No fussing, just discussion. What do you think about this category or that category, so on and so forth? The best way, I think, for you to initiate this discussion is for each person to make a budget and compare the two. So that's why you have three, because you're each going to do one. Then you're going to come together to make a master budget where you hash out the differences between your two budgets. You talk about why that number needs to be a certain number, and you come to an agreement as a couple about it. If you're single, you say, why do I need 3 copies? Well, you might mess one up. Or, let's be honest, you're going to make a rough draft, and then you're going to need to look and see where you have placed the most weight outside of paying for your home, and you may need to make adjustments. You may need to alter your budget before you come to a final master copy. I'm giving you a guide below. It's provided by wellkeptwallet.com. I'll include this link in the description of the video so that you can access this if you're only able to join us online. This pie chart wheel, what have you, gives you a good guide on what percentage of your budget should end up where. It's a guide, though, because your family may put emphasis on something else more than another family. For instance, recreation may be very important to your family, and it may need to be higher than the 5 to 10% recommended on the wheel. That's fine, but if you add to it there, you must take away from it somewhere else, because at the end of the day, this must add up to 100%. If it's adding up to more than 100%, then we have a problem. We have more going out than we have coming in, or we're allocating more to go out than we have coming in. So it's a guide. The easiest way probably to help you see this and kind of visualize and adapt it for application to what we're doing this week is for you to draw a circle probably on the back of one of those budget sheets, and on the back of it to recreate this wheel and change those percentages to actual dollars from your monthly income, real dollars. So what do you mean, Brother Jeff? Well, you need to see where you need to shoot to end up on your budget. So for instance, and I would hope everybody's income is higher than this, certainly, but $100 is just an easy example for me to do without having to explain a whole lot to you. And so let's use the food category on your sheet there. Food is at 10 to 15%. So if my monthly income were $100, 100 times 0.1 is $10, 100 times 0.15 is $15. So food is $10 to $15 of a $100 budget. That's 10 to 15%. Easy enough, right? So once you compare the wheel to your real spending habits, then you can have some insight on what you need to adjust. So you're going to need 3 different things at this point. You're going to need your cash flow sheet, which shows you what's really been happening. You are going to need this wheel, which is going to give you an idea of what you should target in each category. And then you're going to need your budget sheet that you're going to use to make your plan, your game plan on that sheet from looking at these other 2 sheets. Now, this week you're working on completing a budget for the month of October. September is too far gone for you to make a plan and try to adjust your income. I would never recommend putting yourself under the stress of trying to catch up at this point in the month. So we will just let be what will be for this month, and we will focus on imposing our will, which is God's will in this case, on our finances in October. So you should have 3 copies per person, so couples can each do one and compare. Some of you may be couples in the room, so you'll have 6 copies. Others may have spouses who are in other classes, and you're going to have to translate this material to them at home or have them watch this video to hear what I had to say about it. But you can do that, okay? So then you'll come together, make your master budget, bring those back with you next week. One of the things I want to remind you as we get ready to close out tonight is this. When you formulate the budget, always give God his money first. There's a giving space, charitable contribution space on the budget. It's on the right side near the top. You want to plug that number in first and know that you gave God what was rightfully his, and then calculate everything else. And the reason I'm going to tell you that is it's right, it's biblical. But I want to close with a quick story, and you can have someone to pray. Melissa and I were about to get married, and when we did the budget for our house together for the very first time, we calculated all of our income and bills, and we got to the end and had literally no money left over. We couldn't afford to be married. To be honest with you, we were both going to school, we were both working jobs. Neither one of our jobs at that moment that we were doing this budget were full time, although that changed before we actually got married. But we were just looking at, can we afford to pay for this house we're about to buy? Can we pay our utilities? Can we have groceries? Can we do what we need to do? We felt like we could because, we're living at home and we're paying for all of our expenses related to home. So we felt like we could make it. But one of the things that was the question mark is we'd not paid the house bills before. Our parents had always paid the mortgage, always paid the utilities, so on and so forth. So we needed to make sure we had enough excess in our budget to be able to do that. We felt like we could, weren't sure, calculate it. Sure enough, couldn't afford it, too expensive. We started talking about needing different jobs to make the numbers work. What could we cut here or there, what have you. Then we realized we left God out of our budget. Now, both of us were faithful givers. We were both writing checks to the church all the time. And you know what we did with that budget? We trashed it and started over. And when we started our new budget, we gave God his money first, calculated all the numbers, and somehow the numbers worked. Now, it's easy for anyone watching this video to say, you just miscalculated the numbers. I'm going to tell you, we learned a hard lesson that day of what life would be like if we didn't honor God with our first fruits. Lucky for us, it was on paper. It wasn't reality. We've never failed to honor him with our finances, and he's always taken care of us, even when we've made a lot of money and even when we've not made that much money. And so when we budget as a family, we always look at what he deserves first and then everything else after. And so when I'm teaching people how to manage their finances God's way, I always tell this story, and I always remind them, give God what he deserves first. Everything else will fall into place. It may not look that way right now, and it may be very daunting to look at your numbers, but God will help you figure out your finances. And part of figuring out your finances is honoring him first. So y'all have a great night. Have someone close y'all out in prayer. And I love you and look forward to being back with you next week.